Hi there, Lisa Nutt here, your host for EngageU, the podcast for the Tucson Association of Realtors. I am here today with Sean Cody, our Director of Government Affairs, and the Director of Economic Development for Pima County, Mr. Heath Viscovi-Chiordi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good to have you. So, in general, share with us the mission of Pima County Economic Development.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward for us. So we're engaged in community-based economic development, right? So as a local or a regional government, it's our responsibility to serve the citizens and provide services. Some of those are critical infrastructure. Some of them are services like mine, where what we're doing is trying to attract and create new jobs in this community for people to take those jobs. But it's not just about having a job that makes $65,000 a year or whatever that might be. It's actually a job that leads to another job, right? So that you're creating upward economic mobility. So that's one of the things that we focus on, is just the strata of different types of jobs that we're attracting, in what industries make sense for us, and then again, that it allows individuals to move up. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? Very clearly, not only the industries that you're looking at, but there's workforce development, housing, all those things attached to
Education.
it. Exactly. So we try to kind of, think about all of those things as we're looking at these companies that we're trying to attract.
Excellent.
How big is the department?
Our department is pretty tiny, actually, comparatively. So since we serve all of Pima County, metro of 1.1 million people, effectively, with Tucson surrounding areas, unincorporated areas, we've got myself, Patrick Kavanaugh, Kelly Maslin, Artemio Hoyos, and Julie McWilliams. So we're five.
So a small but mighty crew.
Yeah, technically 4.5 FTEs if you want to get technical about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So you said a lot goes into this effort. One of the guiding documents is the county's economic development plan.
Yes.
I believe it's adopted every 3 years by the Board of Supervisors. Talk to us a little bit how that guides the goals and the direction of the department.
Yeah, so it effectively is all of the goals of our department, right? So I think a few different things on this one. It is a 3-year plan. So for what we have right now, it's 2023 to 2026. As we just begin to enter 2025, we will start the process of updating it in some form or fashion. That'll probably happen within the next 6 months or so when we'll kick that off. The important thing about the plan is that it does chart the entire course. And the way that we charted that course, I think, is one of the most important pieces to it, because we went through about a year-long process of engaging the entire region and as many different constituents, as many different groups as possible, so that their feedback was in that plan. So this is not just like county as an organization creating a plan, right, and then engaging and implementing it. It was the county creating a plan through a collaborative effort, right? So not only did we have individuals in real estate, academia, municipalities, City of Tucson, Marana, Oro Valley, Sahuarita, City of South Tucson, unincorporated areas. We had Metro Chamber, we had all the different chambers in the region, actually, Pima Community College, you name it. At some point, all of these individuals were involved in that process. So the positive thing for that is that the needs of the community in all of these different areas are reflected in that plan in some form or fashion. We also did surveys, right, directly with all the businesses, chatted directly with businesses as well, and also constituents, right? So we had community surveys that went out in both English and Spanish as well, right? So that we could make sure that we were covering as much ground as humanly possible. It is a codified policy document, right? So the Board of Supervisors did approve it. It will be good for the duration of its lifespan. If we need to extend it, we can do that without updating it technically, but we likely will update it before we go for a different approval. And if we do another approval, it could be another 3-year document. We also might be able to tweak it to where it's a 5-year document. Either way, it's living and breathing, right? And there's flexibility built in already, so we're kind of good and mobile with it.
That, and then so it's codified, which means that it also includes guideposts, I imagine, and measurable aspects of it, right? And so how often does that reporting occur, or those updates occur?
Perfect segue. And very excellent, because in the beginning, then Supervisor Bronson said, this is a very large plan. How are you guys going to kick it off? And so the recommendation was, let's pull 5 of those goals or 5 of those initiatives out, and then associate KPIs, metrics, and all that kind of stuff with them, and then move those things forward. So that was kind of like how we started to gain traction. And then that was actually kind of corroborated with now Vice Chair Scott as well. So that was a really good thing. The way that we're moving those things forward is just through the actual plan itself, right? So it's one of those things where if you take one of those initiatives and you start talking about what is the best way to measure success, we created kind of a duality of doing it, the quantitative and the qualitative.
Right.
Because a lot of it is interactions like this, right, that we get to go about doing in our daily lives and our daily job. But it's also the capital investment, right? And so those tangible numbers that actually have an effect. Reporting is constant. That's the thing. I meet with my superiors, right, once a month at minimum. We do formal reports through memoranda to the Board of Supervisors once a quarter, as well as an annual report. And then, of course, ad hoc, right? If there's ever a question, anyone can reach out at any time and we'll answer that question, provide as much information as possible.
Great. So, new businesses, new industries, hopefully, right, in this plan. What impact do you think those efforts have, especially on the local housing market?
Yeah, so it's going to increase demand, right? As we're successful in attracting companies or expanding companies, that means that more individuals are either going to be moving here or they might be making more money to where they might seek to upgrade, right? So that kind of shifts what the dynamic looks like. So housing is extremely important, right? It's directly connected to workforce, and that is directly connected to our ability to attract these companies, because nowadays there's always kind of a tie for first place about what is the most important thing, right? Is it workforce or now is it power, right? Electricity has become increasingly
And overall
important.
infrastructure, probably.
Correct, and it varies, right? There are some that stress the requirements for one type of infrastructure over another just by virtue of whatever their industry is, right? But when all is said and done, the best infrastructure is the people, right? And those people need a place to be. So as an example, the county has, an affordable housing commission and task force that they've gone through a lot of diligence on, released a few different RFPs with some money behind it to upgrade existing housing, to create new housing, etc. Because we're firmly aware that there is a gap, right? And it doesn't take one organization to fill those gaps. It's everybody working together.
It's a village.
Yeah, and another really cool thing is the Pima County Industrial Development Authority, as well as the Tucson Industrial Development Authority, have partnered on multiple iterations of a single-family mortgage revenue bond program. And that's effectively a certain amount of dollars that's authorized by our governing bodies that allows us to deploy those dollars for individuals that meet certain income thresholds to be able to purchase their first homes.
That are usually down payment assistance programs.
Correct. And some of them are like, they can be forgivable grants and all these types of things, right? So whatever, whatever iteration works, that's what's going on. And those programs have been extremely successful so far.
And many of them run out of funding
in
a very short amount of time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yeah. Because it also speaks to quality of life, right? And not only being able to retain recruit companies, but also to retain them.
Yeah.
Right, because we are in competition with similarly sized metro areas.
Yes.
Yeah.
The retention piece is interesting, right? Like, so how much of your focus is actually earmarked or given to retaining the businesses that are here?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? I feel like everybody wants like a percentage, right, of effort kind of thing.
Yeah, can you simplify it for us?
It's very difficult, right, to qualify.
Is that an unreasonable question?
No, not at all. Think about this. If it makes any sense, 100% of the time I'm thinking about BRE, which is business retention and expansion, and also simultaneously business attraction. So 200%?
Right.
But I think that's
what we want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. But the crazy thing about our department is, even though we're small, we have a lot of energy in there. And so Kelly Maslin runs our business retention and expansion program. So she's the one who's out there setting up these meetings, meeting with these businesses. Of course, I go when I can as well. And it's basically keeping the finger right on the pulse of what's happening with those businesses. Not only seeing where they're at right now, but if they have plans to expand, and then we can identify ways that we can help them. And we do that in tandem with the region, right? So some corridors involved in that. City of Tucson is, and if we're doing a BRE visit in one of the other municipalities of Marana, Oro Valley, or Sahuarita, those economic development directors are involved in those meetings. And in fact, just to drive a point home, while we are Pima County Economic Development, so we're very broad, each of those municipalities has their own economic development director.
Right.
So instead of us overstepping, we tend to be complementary to them. So we're not overtaking any of their efforts. We just simply say, hey, if you need us, right, tap us in anytime. Or if we make a connection before they do for whatever reason, because we all are connecting in so many different ways, We bring them in and we say, you guys want to run point because it's in your jurisdiction. That's all you. Let us know, and we're going to do whatever we need to do.
Because it is all about partnership, right?
100%.
And this work cannot be conducted in isolation, right? Or we certainly can't operate at our highest and best. So talk about some of those strategic relationships, right? And what they look like and feel like. Give us maybe a recent example.
Yeah. I think there's so many. So I can say with Marana, Oro Valley, and Saurita as an example, we actually were all using the same lead generation software. And that was the reason for that was because we wanted to effectively have one unified approach, right? So each of their needs are different because it's very respective to what their assets are.
Right.
And for us, the idea was complementing those efforts and also to leverage our assets, right, to be able to attract what exists in our plan, right? What industries.
Probably not to duplicate efforts unnecessarily.
Correct. And then the idea is that once they've identified a company that they want or they need or whatever, we can come in and help them, right? But the biggest, I think, benefit to it was not only did they generate leads or did we generate leads together, but you could tap anyone in at any given moment. So I could reach out to Paul in Oro Valley or Victor in Saurita and say, hey, this is happening. This company may or may not be a fit for Oro Valley or Saurita or Marana. What do you think? How should we approach this together? So it's a really cool unified approach, and I think we renewed that subscription now, so we're going to be doing it again. I don't believe Saurita is participating this time because they kind of shifted a little bit of their focus. Not a knock against them, they're just doing a thing, right? And so we're still involved with them every single day, talk with them, do whatever we got to do to help. So that's kind of a local partnership. An interesting one that we have up at the state level with the Arizona Commerce Authority is recently partnering on a lot of different foreign direct investment visitation that we've had. So this involves everybody, but because the county is such a prominent figure, right, just in the region as well as in economic development, when they are discussing traction opportunities, the ACA, with foreign companies or different countries that have similar interests, they bring in municipalities, and so they bring us in on these discussions. So we've entertained a fair few groups of individuals down here, and again, not just with the ACA, but it's the ACA, the county, the city, some corridor, etc., working together. So we've had Swedish delegations here. We just had it was a group of French businesses. I believe we're going to have a group of German businesses coming up relatively soon. We're working concerted on some Mexico efforts as well. And so we're just trying to do all of it all at the same time.
Because generally speaking, Mexico and Canada have been the two leading foreign investors for the state, right? Historically, those numbers haven't changed much over time, even when I was doing economic development. So, and the UK is another region that is often interested in us.
Yeah, and we actually have had a couple of visitations where we've left the country, right? And we've actually gone to Mexico City with the ACA and several of our partners down here. I'll actually be going to Mexico City again this coming February on another trip. And then we actually went to Taiwan because of the semiconductor boom in Arizona.
TSMC, especially in the Phoenix area.
Yeah, so we went there to see if maybe there's an attraction opportunity for some of those upstream and downstream suppliers, manufacturers, all that kind of stuff, so that they can be in proximity to what's happening up in Phoenix, but not necessarily in the fray. And it's a different, kind of competitive cost, right? So we're a little bit more competitive from an affordability standpoint. Several things that they have to work out, right? But we do have a very unique value proposition down here that could facilitate some of those things happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we mention, and it probably requires partnership, is the Mosaic project.
Yes, yeah, amazing project. Really interesting to have worked on. First and foremost, shout out to my boss Carmine, who's been working on that for it seems like forever, and Frank Knott, obviously, and Lindsay Knott. I think what has happened, seeing that groundbreaking first and foremost, really drives the reality of it home. It's extremely unique and is going to be effectively a flagship program down here, in my opinion.
I would say for the Southwest.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
100%. Even better context, honestly. We're going to be drawing so much attention, right, in so many different ways that this will put us on the map in a very unique way. And brand new infrastructure, right, in that industry or those industries, right, that are all kind of coalescing, is going to make us extremely attractive. Tourism will be huge for us, right?
Well, huge, right? Because I think it's an example of in community development, certainly we talk about strength-based approaches, right? To me, this is such a strength-based approach, given how important tourism is to us. You know, at least $1 billion a year, right, in tourism. Climate overall, right, is such an important selling point for us. And so even though it's a venue, it's a destination, the multiple industries, right, and resources that will be not only tapped into, but expanded.
Well, and to your point earlier about partnership, right? It's a unique partnership between private development and government. There's academic partnerships there. There's, you know, obviously sports partnerships with the University of Arizona and the Ice Cats and everything.
But also new sports that aren't generally played here.
Yes, and everyone talks about hockey in the desert, right? I find it kind of funny because
and how successful ice hockey clubs have been.
And
right?
they're very successful. And it's interesting because there's a lot of locals who love playing hockey. And everyone's always like, oh, it's so crazy to have hockey in the desert. I've been playing hockey for years. I played from when I was 5 years old until I was 16 years old. So everyone's kind of freaking out about it. And I'm like, that's, you know, I was doing that 20 years ago. No big deal. But it's really cool because all those partnerships coalesce. And then there's education partnerships too, right? So, you know, PCC with their culinary program and everything, there's a direct link to this whole thing too. So it's just some of the things that you never would think about. And sometimes you don't think about those at the front end. But as things develop
during the discussion and the kind of the creative aspect of it,
the light bulbs start going off, right? And everyone's like, yeah, this is going to be a really cool thing.
Because it's sports complex, essentially, right? But it'll incorporate entertainment and hospitality.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in a nutshell, and groundbreaking has taken place.
Yep.
It's a 5-year project, or there's different phases?
Different phases. I think the overall economic impact, at least what has been calculated now, is like $12.5 billion, 1 million square feet under roof. And again, I'll have to go back to see if that's just for phase one or if it's the iterations of all the phases.
Right.
There's a little bit of, you know, leg room to move because sometimes phasing does not happen exactly as you think it's going to. But when all is said and done, the numbers are huge, right? And that's only really good for the whole region and for everybody down here.
And it'll be interesting to see because there's the usual communities that come to us for these types of experiences, right? But how that changes over time and what other opportunities we're able to recruit and retain as a result of having this really expansion of the Keno sports complex.
And it'll add such a really important element of quality of life that not only does it make it really beneficial for us in attracting more opportunities in sports and sports tourism, but that type of venue is extremely attractive to people with just traditional regular companies, right? Whatever that looks like, and their workers. That's a quality of life thing that we can tout and we can talk about.
Right.
And we can say, not only are you going to just love it here in general because it's beautiful, et cetera, but have you seen this brand new beacon of amazing opportunity and fun that your employees are going to love, by the way? Bring them here.
And families can spend time in, right? And youth development, right? So the list goes on and on.
You name it,
really
it'll probably
exciting.
be involved.
Yeah, great, excellent, thanks.
So economic development is generally something elected officials don't have a hard time talking about, but as we talked a little bit about, there is a direct correlation with housing, and that gets less attention. In your experience, how important is a community's ability to provide a variety of housing options looked at or valued by site selectors or these businesses when thinking about relocating?
It is an important factor. So it's interesting because sometimes it can get lost to a certain extent up until a certain time in the process. But once you get to that point, there have already maybe been decisions made. And so it's up to us to, from start to finish, right, to continue to paint the picture of what we offer here. On the housing front, I think we're actually in an interestingly decent and improving spot because we do have a lot of variation of different types of housing in the region, and a lot of people love the booming areas of, you know, the Moranas and the Sauritas, right? There's so much growth happening in those areas, and then, you know, even in the county and the city and kind of the southeast, you know, corridor that's happening right now. So all those types of housing are very attractive to people. it is for all intents and purposes affordable, right, in some form or
Certainly as it
fashion.
compares to other
Yeah.
regions.
And again, there's a strata, right? Because not everybody is going to be buying $1 million home. I certainly am not. But if there is something that's kind of in the median, right, those things are accessible. And I think we've got decent supply right now. Don't get me wrong, I know it's tight, it's very tight, and I know that there's a lot of work being done to activate lots and get building happening and all that kind of stuff. And the county and the city and all the municipalities are involved in that, and Saba, you know, you name it. But we talk about it all the time, literally from day one. Just as you mentioned quality of life, the quality of life is not only for the business to thrive, but also for the people, right?
Sure.
And that's a really important component. So we talk about the beauty of the area, all the different values of the communities, what housing options are available. We even go so far as for, you know, talk about like soft landing programs for spouses, for kids. We talk about the school districts, the education, the whole 9 yards, right? So big package of which housing is a significant component. And we're getting creative with it all the time.
We need to,
Yes.
right? And creativity is usually the way that we resolve challenges, right? And formulate solutions.
Absolutely.
So talk to us about some of the greater challenges that we have.
Yeah, I mean, go back to housing. Housing is one of those challenges. The creativity that's been exhibited between the county and the city on an individual and a collaborative basis is always inspiring to me. I will say seeing policymakers like our board and like the council invest effort, time, energy, and money into those things is very important. Number one, because it has a direct effect, but also because it shines a light on a path forward, right? And I think when those opportunities are presented, it also brings people together to talk about what worked and what didn't work. There's always an openness, I think, to fix and change, right, and do things better. Also to engage the community in a better way as well. Nobody's perfect, so we're always iterating, right, on those things. But you have to have the vision, right, which that's kind of where it starts. So that's a challenge. Infrastructure is a challenge as well to a certain extent. It's interesting to me that in some areas of the region, right, infrastructure can be considered poor, not in quality, but just in kind of capacity, if you will.
For its function.
Yeah, and then in some areas, though, like I mentioned earlier on the electrical side, I'll preface it with TEP is doing an amazing job of planning and activating, you know, these service areas. But the loads that are being requested of them are astronomical. And so even for individual projects, you have to do a significant amount of planning and looking 5, 10, 15 years down the road because you're serving that one project and you have to understand how that affects the reliability of the grid, what transmission looks like, what the generation side looks like, and reconcile all that. And it is my happy duty to report that I don't have to do those things, right? That's
Thankfully, it falls on someone else's shoulders.
all on the experts, right? But bringing everybody together to talk about those things is really how we keep solving those issues. And we do have the same, you know, kind of challenges when it comes to wastewater infrastructure. We're the regional wastewater provider. The city, the same with water. And then even in some of the regional municipalities, I used to work for the town of Marana, you know, 4 years ago, 3 years ago now, and you know, they have their own water and wastewater services, so they deal with those kind of pinch points of infrastructure and things like that, and what the long range planning looks like, and then how that reconciles with their policy making body and all those types of things. So.
And finite resources,
Absolutely.
right? Because you're not only wanting to address a present issue,
Yes,
but you're projecting out using information and data that by definition will be insufficient and may even be incorrect. Right, and so.
And I'm happy you said finite resources because you look at water, right? Very important, and I know we'll talk about policy to a certain extent. The idea of water is extremely important, right? It is to Arizona and it is to us.
Water is life, is what I like to say.
It literally is, right? And it's life, like not only actual literal life, but it's actually life of economy too.
Yes.
Right? I mean, these are the things that we think about every day. So we reconcile the use of a natural resource like that with what the capital investment, the jobs created, all the economic impact stuff. But we also seek creative ways as much as possible to make sure that that water is getting the highest and best use, right? So that every drop is used as efficiently as possible and that it's recharged, right? Or that we're using reclaimed water whenever it's possible.
Yes.
There are so many different ways to be creative, but to your point also about finite resources, those are very dollar intensive, right?
Yes.
So there's the financial planning and the fiscal impact and all those different things, how the private and the public come together to make these plans happen, what the contributions look like, et cetera, et cetera. So the challenge is orchestration of all of these things happening simultaneously. It's extremely fun, extremely challenging.
Well, because that's where some creativity can occur, right? And how different perspectives can enrich the discussion in order to formulate those solutions. I like to talk about how our region has a culture of conservation.
Yes.
Arguably among the best in our state and in our region, which has afforded us, right, the ability to bank water, in fact, decades of it. In terms of our consumption, our community is, particularly keen to pay attention to how we are using our water. And yet there's still room for improvement. There's more we can do. Yeah,
it's interesting that it's kind of ingrained in us, right? Like, even as an example, as a young kid, my dad would be like, turn the faucet off. And I'd be like, why? But as I grew older, you better believe I'm turning that faucet off every time, because I'm now privy to much more information. And it's just unique because the conservation ethic, I think, is really deeply ingrained in us just as a community, right? And that's a really cool thing as a Southern Arizonan, is like, it is in us, right?
It is.
So it's very nice.
Great.
Water's obviously finite. It's a valuable resource. You mentioned using the highest and best use of every drop. But that conservation ethos should provide a benefit too, right? Do you think we're leveraging the amount of water we have to attract economic development to its fullest potential?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the answer is yes. Just, take everything out, it is a yes. The reason for that is because of that conservation ethic, we do have a good supply of water here for industrial use. And when we talk about and reconcile what the needs of these companies are and what's already being used, and then how we recharge and how we use reclaimed and what that does to the overall system, right, of water within the region, we've painted a very, very good and attractive picture. We also, and I know this sounds kind of wild, but we do have the opportunity to say no in some forms and fashion as well, right? And that comes with, varying levels of whether you're controlling the land where it might go or whatever that looks like. And so if there is something that doesn't seem like a fit, there is the ability to make sure that we're attracting the things that make sense. Going back to the water concept, right, as an attraction element, when we're talking with these companies, whether it's with the city or any of the regional municipalities, we're already on the same page. And we come out like that at the beginning, which is natural resources are important to us. Water is very important to us. Is it important to you? So we gauge the values, right, simultaneously as we're gauging all of the other economic impact indicators and all those kinds of things.
We're days away from the 2025 legislative session.
Yes.
Any key economic development priorities you've managed to get on the county's legislative agenda?
So we issue an agenda that we kind of, advise on effectively. And so for us, it's going to be multiple different things. We will be paying attention to water policy for sure. As a larger element, the concept of local control, right, just in general, is a very important thing for us to ensure that we can do the things that we have to do and that we've been charged with doing without being preempted in some form or fashion, or passing a cost on or absorbing those obligations, which lessens our ability, right, to deliver critical services and all those types of things. We'll be paying attention to stuff that is directly economic development related. So new incentives, old incentives, preserving existing incentives like the GPLET and foreign trade zone and all these different types of things. Those are all very important to us, so we're keen on paying attention to those things. We'll also be watching the Corporation Commission. Anything that's happening in the regulatory side, especially on electricity, is very important to us. And again, thankfully we have TEP to help us with that, and TRICO as well. So we're always paying attention to those things. And not at the state legislature, but recently at the federal level, the Economic Development Administration was just reauthorized. So that's a very important thing for us, because that actually goes full circle back to the plan, our Economic Development Strategic Plan. One of the benefits of that plan was that we had it certified by the EDA, and that makes us eligible for certain types of dollars that are available. And so now that they are reauthorized, when we do our strategic plan again, we'll make sure that it's conforming to what those requirements are, so that we're even more competitive in those grant spaces.
And leveraging.
Yes.
Right, as much as possible.
Correct. So all of it is inevitably tied, inextricably tied at one point in time or another.
The interdependence.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if anybody wanted to catch up on what you're up to
Or keep up.
what is the best way to do that?
So we have a newsletter, economic development newsletter for Pima County. We call it Pick Pima, and so people can sign up for that as well. I have a LinkedIn where I post a whole bunch of different stuff that we're doing, and it's not just economic development specific, but county-wide, as well as some of the things that I have the benefit and honor to do in kind of the nonprofit space and service space there. We do have an economic development LinkedIn for Pima County as well. I will provide all this information to you. And hopefully we'll be able to put this in our newsletter as well, right? So we can get this out and get your guys' YouTube channel and everything out to a lot more people.
Yeah, we'll provide links. So the newsletter people can subscribe to. Right?
And call me, text me, let's talk. I mean, that's the whole thing too, is being accessible. Doing things like this is always super fun.
Yeah.
I love one-on-one random conversations. I run into so many people in the community. And then I actually ran into somebody 2 days ago, and I was, just getting a drink, and they're like, oh, what's happening out at the Roger Road Wastewater Treatment Campus? And, we had a discussion about it for 20, 25 minutes.
Right.
And it was really nice because you get to connect on things that are just really fun to talk about.
And obviously important to them.
Always, yeah.
Great.
And that's the important thing, too, is that they're actually watching and paying attention. And I love that people are involved like that.
Great. Well, we're happy to do our part.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
I appreciate you guys.
We will provide links to the various resources that Heath identified for us. And, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.